Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
So with 1 second to go in the Red Wings Islanders game on Thursday night, face-offs in Detroit zone, Mickey Redmond says, there's no way they can score in this time. And I'm sitting there on the couch thinking to myself, not the time. There was no way the Red Wings were going to lose all three games in California. There's no way they could be in this position. Just not the time. Luckily, the Red Wings won, thankfully. Otherwise, this episode would have gone in a way, way different direction. But with that being said, welcome to episode 12 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Wolak, joined today by co-hosts Devin Little and George Malik. Our good friend Evan Sabrin is out of the lineup tonight, but don't worry, he'll be back for next episode. So guys, it's the Red Wings won. It was a good game. And
yay!
We're back on track. Before diving into the meat of the episode, just want to remind everyone where they can find us. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Flying Octopod and follow us on YouTube at The Flying Octopod. So, guys, again, Thursday night, Red Wings get the win, back on track. And, it was honestly a good game. Like, it took the Red Wings quite a while to score, but it was a good game. Like, they outshot the Islanders. They pressed all night. And, even when the Islanders scored in the first period, the Red Wings didn't give up or let up. They just kept their foot on the gas, and eventually they solved Sorokin. And it was nice to see, because just the games they've been playing recently, they've been, error prone, making mistakes, just spotty coverage, just not a complete effort. Tonight, I felt like that's as complete of an effort as we're going to see. So definitely an all-around great win for the Red Wings against the Islanders on Thursday night. So wanted to hit on a few notes there. I thought Marco Kasper and Jonatan Berggren looked outstanding this game. Kasper in particular seemed to gel real well with Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat, but then again, who wouldn't in that scenario? It's a good place for the rookie to be. But honestly, he definitely looks the part of an NHLer, and as far as I'm concerned, he's on this team to stay. Also, Dylan Larkin, you can't say enough good things about him. So on pace for 50 goals, which is not something we were expecting at the beginning of the year, but also he just continues to do all the little things right and come through in the clutch for the Red Wings. And just that extra effort to feed Lucas Raymond the puck in the last minute of the game for the go-ahead goal. So players at the end of their shift, they could have easily just been pinned up against the boards and just kind of left the puck there or just tried to, tie it up. But no, he made a great play, and wouldn't you know it, the Red Wings won. But one of the, I guess, more surprising things from the game, from my perspective, is I actually thought that was one of the best games we've seen from Ben Chiarot and Jeff Petry all season. And I don't know if it's the team they were playing against or just being confident with the puck, but far less mistakes. They had a positive, shot differential. They had a positive expected goals differential. They were on the ice for both goals. It's what we want to see in the second pair. And we've been riding them. Everyone's been riding them all season. As the scapegoats for all of Detroit's defensive deficiencies, but credit where credit is due. They did a good job against the Islanders on Thursday night.
Yeah, they honestly, you can probably say that about a lot of players coming off of that Islanders game. A lot of players had either their best performance of the season or their best performance in a while. I think that game you saw a different team than I think you did during the California trip. There were chances both ways. I think that a big word that came to mind watching that California road trip was just lifeless. They were going against teams that they should beat and at least compete with, and just the compete level wasn't there. They looked lifeless, and that's why there was such loud calls for a certain coach to be axed. Just they didn't look like they were playing for the coaching staff anymore. So it's probably a sigh of relief probably from the coaching staff that they came out and looked the way they did against the Islanders, because like I said, they didn't look lifeless. There were chances both ways. I think they got really good, really lucky goaltending from Alex Lyon. A little bit of I think he benefited from a little bit of luck as well as his own talents. I thought he did really well. They got clutch goaltending. All the ingredients were there for them in this game. They got clutch goals, like you mentioned, Tony. That goal from Raymond being in the last minute of the game. You can't ask for a better situation than that, especially when you're down the entire game. And then you're getting stops in the back end. I thought that defensively, that like they were, I wouldn't say they were outstanding or anything, but they were definitely good enough. I mean, they only allowed one goal. Again, I don't know how much more you can complain than you can't really complain about that. And just overall, they played an entertaining brand of hockey in this game, and that's bare minimum what you ask for from the team you watch on a nightly basis, and especially on a night like this where it was Pavel Datsyuk Memorial Night. Basically, you wanted to see an entertaining game because he was an entertaining guy, and I think that even though it took a while to get the outcome that people were hoping for, they got there and they delivered it in style. So I thought that was a really good to see, especially coming off of that California road trip.
To me, they didn't collapse when the Islanders scored the first goal, and that's what we've been seeing so often over the last couple of unpleasant games in California, if you've stayed up for them anyway. You look at the game and it's a bit of a rope-a-dope. If you're not familiar with the phrase, it's Muhammad Ali's statement about the concept that sometimes you have to absorb some blows and you have to kind of work the ropes of the boxing ring to stay in the match. And I felt that the Red Wings did absorb some body blows, but they never let the Islanders come in for the quote unquote knockout punch. Their penalty kill was only called upon once, but it was good enough. Their ability to work through the Islanders, the Patrick Waugh trap, because he definitely plays a trapping style of game. I mean, he was going 1-4 when they were tied, never mind when they were up one. And I felt that, generally speaking, it was just a relief. It was a relief to watch them play the way we know they can. Even though it's a work in progress, there are clearly still players that are, I won't say passengers, but that can contribute more regularly. And I would feel that, yeah, Lyon got lucky a couple times, but that's what happens when you're a goaltender. You need to get lucky a couple of times. I thought that the puck luck for the first 40 minutes was absolutely horrendous. I didn't feel that was the team's problem. I just felt that was puck luck for you. You get a, how do I want to put it? You get an oblong piece of vulcanized rubber frozen by the referees. It is going to bounce your way. Sometimes it's not going to bounce your way. So yeah, some of this was chance, but most of it was earned. Most of it was for lack of a better term, as I like to say, they got their shit together. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't fun sometimes, but they won, and they desperately, desperately needed to prove to the fan base that was booing them at times when their power play stank that they are at least marginally competent, and this is the first step.
It was a complete game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, from start to finish, Of course, there were some gaffes here and there, but like it's hockey, it's going to happen. Like you're never going to have 100% perfection out there, but that's as complete of a game as you're going to see from the Red Wings. And one thing that stood out to me at the end was, right in the minutes leading up to Jonatan Berggren's tying goal, the Red Wings were pressing. They weren't letting up. They weren't, cautious about getting scored on again and definitely losing the game. They had that resiliency to them that we saw at the end of last season, where they thought they could win every game, even if they were down by 3 goals in the third period. They knew they could come back. And just the confidence they had with the puck, moving up by trying to generate some offense and getting some good quality chances, that resiliency had been missing. Like it wasn't there to that degree. For what we saw against the Islanders, that was, it's a strange term to say now, but classic 2023-24 Red Wings right there. Right. And after Lucas Raymond scored to give them the lead, just the joy on the ice, like from Larkin jumping up and down in the corner and Raymond getting the monkey off his back. That was it. It was overdue. And it was a long time coming, and hopefully this is something that the Red Wings can build upon.
Yeah, and speaking of building upon, I think that another takeaway I have from this game is that beginning of season slump that Jonatan Berggren was in is over. He's got 3 goals now in 5 games. He scored the game tying goal in this one, and it was a nice shot, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And he's not a player that is necessarily known for a shot either. So that was, it kind of caught me by surprise how well he shot that puck. But this is a player that, like you said earlier, Tony, he and Kasper looked really good this season, or this game, but progressively over the course of the season, I think Berggren and Kasper have looked better and better as they've gotten more reps. And it's just kind of, I think, the process of getting more comfortable at this level and playing with this team. I think that it's huge that you're seeing Berggren produce the way he is, because that's what he has to do to be an NHLer. He's not going to be a defensive shutdown forward. If he's going to be an NHLer, he's got to produce. And he's starting to hit his stride. So and I guess to kind of compound the thing too is, entering this game, everyone was kind of saying, oh no, Berggren got screwed because Kasper got moved up to play with DeBrincat and Kane, and Berggren got moved down to play with, what was it? It was Kopp was with Rasmussen, and it was Comfer and Mott. Yes, that's right. Yeah, I know I wasn't super inspired by that, but nevertheless, scored the game tying goal and looked really good in the process, and found himself back with Tarasenko by the end of the game. But yeah, I think it's a case just all around where, like I said, a lot of players had their best games, and you saw players that you hope to see perform well.
I think that following, again, something that Tony said very wisely, is that the Red Wings were willing to take some risks here. They were willing to attack. They were willing to some extent, get themselves into some defensive trouble in order to press. And maybe in the San Jose game, as well as the Los Angeles game, maybe the Los Angeles game was the poster child for it. But you just didn't see the Red Wings willing to make any sort of play that involved getting away from their defensive system, even though their defensive system wasn't working. And this time around, they were committed all the way up and down the ice, from the goal line to the behind the opposition goal line. They attacked, they regrouped, they reset, and they played aggressively, and they played with some confidence, which we haven't seen in such a long time, perhaps since the Pittsburgh game, in spurts, and yeah, this one was in spurts too. It wasn't a masterpiece. It wasn't a Picasso, but it was more than enough for the Red Wings to come out with a victory and come out with a third period rally that yielded a last couple minutes of the game winner and a crucial victory that we won't necessarily say will save the coaching staff or save player X or player Y, but in any case, whether it was Petry and Chiarot, I thought that even Gustafsson had a pretty good game, and he's been very clunky all season long. So, to name a few names. So it was finally breaking through the dam. That's where I think they were at.
It's a game of inches, right? The first goal the Red Wings scored, stick busted at the blue line, and Red Wings had a 2-on-1 the other way. Berggren's shot was just inside the post too, and then on Lucas Raymond's game-winning goal, it was just that a little extra effort, a little extra reach from Larkin to shoot the puck out into the slot with Raymond cutting in. Easily could have gone the other way in both cases, but a little extra effort, a little bit of luck, and finally the Red Wings got back on the right side of things. So moving on, before Thursday's game, we were, not sure how things were going to go, how the Red Wings were going to respond after their disastrous road trip, and change was in the air. So we decided to do a little exercise, and each of us kind of took a different approach for what the Red Wings could do in the next coming weeks. I took the approach of what can they do to improve the team to get back in the playoff picture. Devin, on the other hand, was what can the team do to improve their draft lottery? And then George was kind of right in the middle, more moderate take, and kind of putting the brakes on change to a degree. So, with that, we had two moves apiece, and sharing first my approach for how to get this team over the hump and kind of build upon this momentum now from the Islanders game. Is there are, I guess, two main areas where I see the Red Wings needing to improve. One is they're missing like one forward. And I'll come back to that in a bit, but one forward to really unlock their offense. And the other change I would make would be just to revamp the penalty kill completely. So starting with the forward, the thing that I've noticed about this team is that they're lacking that top six, jam with talent. Not exactly David Perron from last season, but just a little bit more physicality, a little bit more speed. The first man in, like on either of the top two lines. The players they have now in those roles, they're not a strong forechecker. I mean, you could say that a little bit about Dylan Larkin, you can say a little bit about Marco Kasper, but usually it's not the center who's the first man in on the forecheck. They're missing someone in that role. And one player that I think would be like a type that I think would be a good fit is someone similar to Evan Rodriguez on the Panthers. And not him per se. I doubt the Panthers would trade him at this point, but that type of player that plays with a little bit of jam, can score, can be the first man in, over-indexing and takeaways, hits, slot shots. They need, if they can add in a forward like that, I think you'll see from top to bottom their forward lines looking really, really good. So like player X that we're acquiring, and Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond on the top line, DeBrincat, Kane, and Kasper on the second line. I thought tonight the mixed up line of Berggren, Comfer, and Tarasenko actually looked really good out there. And then finishing up with Rasmussen, Kopp, and Christian Fischer on the fourth line. But adding that player, hopefully with someone who can stick around on the team for a little bit, just to bring a little bit more physicality to the top six, not some fighter or anything like that, but just someone who adds an element that's missing. Then the penalty kill, did the job tonight, but on the season just has not been good. Only killing off 2/3 of the power plays that opponents get. Things need to change. And what I've been noticing is that the two forwards tend to overload towards the strong side flank when that guy is the puck on the opposing team. I think the logic behind that is to cut off the cross ice passes to the opposite flank or cut off passes to the bumper. But if you're overloading on the strong side, then you are greatly exposing yourself to the backside. And what opponents are doing is just dropping the puck back to the quarterback, slides it over to the wide open weak side flank, who has a great opportunity to either shoot or pass to an open player with the Red Wings scrambling to get over. Full stop. I just think they need to just go to a different strategy. Like, their PK was much better last year. They didn't take the same approach. Maybe revisit what they did last year. But overall, just go back to the drawing board. And with these two things, I do think the Red Wings will be in much better shape when it comes to striving to reach the playoffs, especially with a defense that's improved year over year, goaltending that's improved year over year, and a strong power play. So, Devin, I'll pass it off to you next. So, what can the Red Wings do to get themselves closer to a lottery pick here?
Well, if you know me, you know that I love talking about prospects. Draft season is my jam. So of course I'm going to talk about, how they could start to embrace the tank and maybe finally win that elusive draft lottery. But full disclosure here, I would much rather talk about a playoff run on this show than a tank. So with that in mind, I think the first thing they can do to improve their draft odds is sign Taylor Hall, or acquire Taylor Hall, I should say, from the Chicago Blackhawks. Wait, now why would acquiring a player help with their draft odds? Especially because Tony just made the point that, the acquiring a player might unlock their offense and basically catapult them into the playoffs. Well, it's because this specific player is cursed. And this curse basically makes it so the team he is on gets the first overall pick. It's happened 6 times since 2011. It's kind of crazy. Whatever voodoo magic is going on over there, the Red Wings should try to get in on that and to make matters more possible, I guess. He's recently been a healthy scratch in Chicago. Seems like him and their head coach over there, Luke Richardson, aren't seeing eye to eye on things. Don't really know the full story there, but seems like the fit isn't quite there in Chicago. So why not try to get in on that first overall magic that Taylor Hall seems to bring? And then the other more logical route to tanking would be to kind of hand in hand here, sell a goalie and just really add to their weaknesses, really make their weaknesses worse. We witnessed it just recently against the Islanders, right? Good goaltending, even just adequate goaltending, can hold you in games, can help you win games that you maybe did, or keep you in games that you maybe don't deserve to be in. Talbot and Lyon at times this season have been heroes for their team. I know early in the season they were both like top 10 in their statistical categories. Not so much anymore, but they're both still doing really well. And they're doing well, which means that there should be interest in them out there if a team needs a goalie. And the Red Wings do have depth down in the AHL to where, if they decided they wanted to trade a Talbot or a Lyon, they can call up Ville Husso, and it's not, they still have a goalie to have a rotation with, and they probably got a little bit worse, let's be honest. And then to kind of pronounce their weaknesses, I mean, personally, I think that, there's a reason why we made the point that the Chiarot Petry pairing looked the best it has, and we're almost 20 games into the season. I think that their defense outside of Simon Edvinsson and Moritz Seider is, we'll just say, sporadic. And I think that if you were able to subtract from that blue line even more, you're going to see even worse results. You're probably going to see just how much Edvinsson and Seider can play on a nightly basis. But that should ultimately result in fewer games won. I do think that you shouldn't mess with the forward group too much outside of adding Taylor Hall and his voodoo magic. Because I do like the mix that they have. And like, I do agree with Tony. It seems like they may be a piece or two away from having a really good thing up front. So don't mess with that too much and just kind of really pronounce your weaknesses and bada bing, bada boom. James Hagens is a Detroit Red Wing in June.
I went for, as Tony said, a more moderate view. To me, it's about stopping the bleeding. It's about stabilizing the organization. And to me, there are two moves. One I've been banging the drum on for a while, and another is, I guess, something that we all seem to be agreeing upon. And the first thing is that I believe they need to get a net front forward. Somebody who can screen the goalie on the power play, somebody who can bring some physicality, as Tony said, somebody who can forecheck. Because when you've got either your centers forechecking or you're asking Lucas Raymond to be the best forechecker on your line, that's a little sketchy in my opinion. Well, if you're looking for somebody who can do what Michael Rasmussen was supposed to be doing this season, you're looking for a player with some size. You're looking for a player with some snarl. You're not necessarily looking for a power forward because those players are so incredibly hard to find. They're the snowflakes of the league to some extent, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that they're difficult to find and difficult to keep. And so along those lines, I was thinking of somebody like Frank Vetrano from the Anaheim Ducks, somebody that we've seen this year play very good in a forechecking role and a physical role, and two players from the Seattle Kraken who have been in the trade rumor market for a while now, and Yanni Gourde, who is always a pain in the ass to play against, especially when he plays against Detroit. He's one of those wing killers that you would think might almost get himself a contract if he becomes a free agent, simply because he plays so very viciously and competitively. And if you want to bring up the team's compete level, you get somebody like Yanni Gourde. And Chris Tanev, who is big, who is a bit of a lug, but can stand in front of the goalie, again, can do some forechecking. These are all examples of players that can give the Red Wings a hand in terms of stabilizing their forward unit and improving their special teams play. And then, banging the drum, here I am. I think the Red Wings desperately need another shutdown defenseman, right-handed preferably, to spell Moritz Seider on some of the hard minutes that he's playing against those defensive matchups. My pick for the present moment is Rasmus Ristolainen of Philadelphia, just as sort of a start down the path, because he's a right shot D. He's been getting a lot better in Philadelphia. He was sort of an inconsistent player in Buffalo, somebody who would make these tremendous defensive plays and teeth-rattling physical hits at times, and then he'd be able to be walked through on the next play. But to me, somebody of the Rasmus Ristolainen ilk, if we're not waiting for Jacob Trouba and Mrs. Trouba to find their happy place outside of New York, then you're looking at somebody like Ristolainen as that right shot D, who is at least somewhat up. Number one is somebody who can spare Seider some minutes, and number two is going to be somewhat affordable, because I don't think the Wings are going to be swinging for the fences for the next Dustin Byfuglien, if you will, as the next big physical shutdown defenseman. And I wouldn't go for Dustin Byfuglien anyway, but that was a name that I plucked out of the air. So regardless of what the Wings do, though, in terms of their changes, when we're talking about coaching staff, we're talking about player personnel. I was thinking about the Boston Bruins and what they've done with firing Jim Montgomery and bringing in Joe Sacco. And I think about the fact that just change takes time. Change takes time to materialize when you're talking about a team taking its systems of play, lobbing the head off the coaching staff, as it were, and bringing in change and bringing in new players. It's going to take time to change. It's going to take time to gel, for the team to gel. It's going to take time for the team to sort itself out. To some extent, I think that the Red Wings playing Boston at a home game on Saturday might be the very best way for them to see what they can do in terms of taking advantage of a team that's still somewhat, I don't want to say beatable, but I want to say exploitable is the word, as a team that is still sort of feeling itself out after the aftershocks of losing Jim Montgomery. And, that becomes a question as to what you might do in terms of making changes, because the fact that you're not going to snap your fingers and get to the Red Wings 2.0.
And just real quick, this thought came to mind. You mentioned in your response there, George, specifically during the California trip. I found myself thinking quite a bit that there is like a Jacob Trouba sized hole on this roster, and kind of the more I think about things that happened in the offseason and how they happened and what did and didn't happen and what this team very clearly still needs, what's kind of its missing pieces, I really do kind of buy into that Jacob Trouba story. I don't know how far along they were into it, but I do think there was interest there because, like you said, George, they really could use a right-handed defenseman that can shut things down. They are missing some of that leadership from David Perron. Jacob Trouba is the captain of the New York Rangers. I'm sure he could provide some leadership, help bring together the locker room. I don't know that I'm not saying that Jacob Trouba is the magic bullet that's going to join the team at some point and make everything perfect. But it does feel, especially like I said, during the California trip, where you're seeing like the worst of this team, that type of player is what's missing, like especially on that blue line. The offense can, when it is at its best, the offense does some really good things, but man, they really do. I'm going to bang that drum with you, George. They could use that right-handed shutdown guy.
So whether the Red Wings are adding, they're subtracting, or they're making more tempered moves, if you will, share your thoughts. Reply to us on Twitter, reply to us on YouTube, and DM Devin. Either way, let us know what you think. Regardless of which direction the Red Wings go, they are a little short on salary cap space. Even after removing Olli Maatta, not a ton of room to work with. So any player you're bringing in, whether it's Taylor Hall or Yanni Gourde or what have you, salaries most likely going to need to go out as part of that. But with that, we want to transition on to the last topic we had for today, which is talking about the salary cap. So as you all know, the cap for this year is $88 million. It's expected to go up to $92.5 million next year. That's what early reports had suggested, based on revenue sharing and just the way the league is trending post-COVID. It's unconfirmed, but so was the roughly 88 million cap hit or salary cap ceiling amount that we have now until it's confirmed. So with that, over the weekend, Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman reported that it's possible that the cap could jump beyond that 92.5 to anywhere from 95 to 97 million next season. Following that, Gary Bettman kind of, pulled things down and said, I don't know where the 92.5 million came from. Not a story. For something that's unconfirmed, and there's factors playing into it with like hockey revenue and the revenue split between the players and owners. I get why Bettman wouldn't want to commit to an exact number this far out. He's a lawyer after all. Managing risk is his forte. But if the Red Wings, let's start with this. If the salary cap jumps up to $92.5 million, then the Red Wings are going to have about $16 million of cap space heading into the offseason. And this is after projecting, modest contracts for Jonatan Berggren and Albert Johansson, their main restricted free agents. With that $16 million, they have, in my opinion, 4 positions to fill. So they have they need to bring in 2 top 6 forwards and, 2 top 4 defensemen. Kind of a big task, and it's always possible that someone like Nate Danielson will fill in for one of those top 6 forward roles. I don't know if we can ask Axel Sandin-Pellikka to jump into a top 4 role immediately. That might be too much, so I just want to temper those expectations now. But still, Red Wings have holes to fill. $16 million if the salary cap ceiling is at 92.5 next season. It jumps up to 95, 97. You got more money to work with, and there are more players that are affordable to fill these roles. So this is something to closely monitor as the Red Wings enter a pivotal offseason, this coming summer, hopefully after a playoff berth.
For me, the best way that I have described Gary Bettman, in my own opinion, humble opinion, is I call him Chairman Mao. The chairman, because he is the chairman of the Board of Governors, and he is also somebody who, through 2.5 seasons worth of lockouts, has worked the league into an organization that has a salary cap and has a 50-50 split between players and owners. That was a painful time between when you go with 94 95 when there was the half season lockout, and then you go to 04 05. You think about how many Red Wings were starring players at the time, how many players they had to get rid of due to the cap, what could have been in that season in particular. And then the lockout in it was 13-14, I think. You guys will have to fact check me on that one. In any case, Bettman is a unassuming man who is at the same time the elephant in the Board of Governors room. Nothing happens without the emperor telling you what the new clothes are going to be. And, so if Bettman says it's not a story, maybe it's not a story. But if I'm to get gossipy for a moment, there are times that, especially if you're talking about the LeBrons, the Friedmans of the world, there are times that it always seems to me, around Board of Governors meetings especially, that these little trial balloons are sent out where a Board of Governor or an owner or a GM might say, well, we were talking about the salary cap and how it's probably going to go up to 92.5, but we're getting these great TV revenues. We've rebounded from the pandemic. Obviously, we're still a gate-driven league, but we've been at least considering it going up to 94 or 95 million. And with the NHLPA almost always pushing for the maximum, what was the word? Inflator. When they used to have that ability to push the inflator, you would see that and you would expect that. But obviously, when you talk about the PA, they've become more and more concerned over the past couple of years about escrow. because if you're not familiar with the concept, because this is a 50-50 revenue split, the league gives the players a certain amount of their salaries that has to be put in an escrow account to cover league overages, whether that's an LTIR spending or teams with deferred bonuses that they choose not to defer. If it goes over 50-50, the players pay that back. So in any case, yes, with the CBA coming up after the end of next season, this is probably going to be a CBA issue. But it had me thinking about the good old days of 2001, 2002, and thereabouts, when the Red Wings were the haves, among a league of certain haves and have-nots. You almost think about it like English soccer, where you've got, or should I say football? I'm sorry, everybody. It's football. So English football. But you're thinking about the Manchester Uniteds and the Manchester Cities and all of those top teams that can recruit almost with reckless abandon to some extent, because they're the haves. And then you have the have-nots that really struggle to reach the floor of the salary cap in the NHL. They were talking about it tonight on the broadcast, about how you look at the Phoenix Coyotes roster and how they had Datsuk, who signed the one-day contract to retire as a Red Wing. They had Pronger, they had Hossa, and those were all dead cap deals just to stay to the bottom of the payroll range. The idea of the Ilitches flexing their muscles again is very intriguing. And the idea of giving the team a competitive advantage in terms of spending, it's God, I don't want to say this word, but it's kind of sexy. If you're going to use the sports term for sexy, which is a god awful word to use when you're talking about things that aren't sexy, this is that hot rumor that gets people thinking about what might happen. And I'm sorry. I'm already sorry. I'm looking at the faces of my compatriots here, and I'm sorry for saying that, but well, it's out there now. I think it's a sexy story.
You want to follow that, or
yeah, can you follow that, Devin?
No, I can't follow it, but I also thought that in Elliot Friedman's article, he raised a good point, and you're kind of touching on it too, George. There are definitely some teams in markets out there. Can they really go up to 110 million? I mean, if they can, great. I mean, feasibly, I guess this is one of those things where, I'm just a dude talking in front of a camera about hockey. I'm not somebody in boardrooms figuring out what the salary cap's going to be. But I have to imagine that if they're going to place the salary cap as high as these figures that are being thrown out right now, it's with the understanding that every team is capable of reaching it. And I mean, every team's owned by billionaires and millionaires that can absolutely afford it, but it's more of a matter of, these are businesses, right? You don't usually get into businesses to lose money. I think that there are going to be some teams that the higher the cap goes, that gets into what you're talking about, George, where you can start to kind of go back to 20 years ago when teams could just kind of throw cash around and buy a team. Because some teams are just going to have more resources just based on their market and what they are. It's not really outrageous for me to say that the Toronto Maple Leafs probably have more resources than the Anaheim Ducks. And there's a lot of cases like that across the league. So as the cap goes higher, how much does that impact? And if it doesn't impact, that's probably the ideal outcome, because that means that it kind of goes to that old saying, a rising tide raises all ships, right? All the ships are raising, they're all able to afford this higher figure. So ultimately, this is good news. You want to see the cap increase year over year, and you definitely want to see it increase substantially. It wasn't that long ago that we were seeing the cap increase by $1 million every season, and cool, right? That doesn't really do much. And now we're talking about jumping up 4 million and maybe even more. That's enough to buy a really good player just by itself. So this is definitely a sign of good things. It's a sign, as you said off the top, that post COVID things have been going really well for this league, and it's why we're talking about contracts being more expensive than they've ever been. It's why we're talking about adding a 33rd and a 34th team to the league. And it's why we're talking about just salaries in general, contracts in general being more lucrative than they've ever been. I honestly think that might be a really big thing they focus on in the CBA is just contract structure. I know I've seen some stuff about pushing for shorter term deals, which might mitigate some of that risk with the big numbers being thrown out. But that's then we'll worry about all that stuff a year or two from now when they're actually getting into the nitty gritty on this. I'm just glad that where we are today is nowhere near where we were 20 years ago when we did lose an entire season of NHL hockey. I do remember how contentious that was, and it's never felt like that. Even when we lost half of that season in 2012, 2013, that's the season it was. I do remember that being a bummer, but it was never as contentious as that season. And even heading into this next CBA negotiation, it definitely feels like a peacetime negotiation. No one's going to be willing to dig their heels in and lose a season over anything. So selfishly, as a hockey fan, that's what I want. Keep it coming, right? And to me, it just makes sense that the more you're able to have your product out there, the more growth you're going to see. And we've seen that quite a bit, especially over the last 5 years or so.
And one last note on the salary cap is whether the cap's increasing to like 92.5 million next season or 95 or 97, what have you. And the next CBAs negotiated that summer. And then the year after, the cap is up over 100 million, most likely. Man, Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, and Moritz Seider's deals are going to look so good then with salary cap being as high as it's going to be. So for SG Red Wings fans, that is something we are doing really well right now. So with that, want to wrap up for today's episode. Thanks to everyone for joining. Quick programming note. We ran a contest last week, named a former Red Wings player very discreetly in the episode, and no one got it. It was too tricky. And like, I get it. We went on a whole tangent about Roberto Luongo and mentioned other Red Wings players and gave hints about the mystery player, where in the episode to find it. No one got it. We broke up the name. The answer was Norm Miracle, the goalie from the late 90s for the Red Wings. Said something that's something about, that's not the norm at the beginning of the episode. And then about 10 minutes later said that for the Nashville Predators, it would be a miracle if they made the playoffs. So we'll have to figure out something else because we have a jersey we want to give away. And, we'll figure out a new contest there. But thanks again for joining us today. And again, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Flying Octopod and subscribe to our YouTube page at the Flying Octopod. So thanks everyone, and let's go Red Wings.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.